I'm back with Zaid today, and we are going to get into a very interesting topic, grounding. All right. And I think people hear that. I'm not sure if people really understand what that means. All I know is it feels really good to go outside and touch grass or go near the ocean. And so that's what I know. But you're saying, and a lot of people are saying, there's much more significant health implications to getting in contact with nature, specifically the ground. So define grounding for me, Zaid, and tell us why it's so important.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, to take a simple perspective on the definition of grounding, I think it's essentially just matching matching your, I mean, this is kind of difficult to explain, but I guess matching your electroconductive potential to that of the natural Earth surface. I think that's essentially what it boils down to. And I also think it essentially just boils down to transferring free electrons from the surface of the Earth into your body. And of course, I think, of course, there are levels deeper to this, so we can get into the actual mechanisms. But really, it's just about a transfer of free electrons from the Earth into the body.
Okay, so I like that definition. Essentially, when we make contact with the ground, free electrons from the Earth are being transferred in. And now I guess the question is, what does that even mean, though? Like what are the health implications of that? Because we live in a modern society where most people do not get contact with the ground, right? They're indoors, they have shoes all the time. And once again, through the lens of evolutionary biology, which we discussed last time, this is not how we evolved. We were in contact with nature almost constantly. So if we take that away, I just assume there are health implications to that. And now there's a lot of research that might be showing that. So if we are not making contact, if we're not getting those free electrons, what is actually happening on a physiological level?
Yeah. So I mean, on a physiological level, I think that at the end of the day, a lot of this boils down to just the increase in chronic inflammation. And that adding up, over the years and decades, and then leading or contributing heavily to a lot of the major chronic diseases. So, this has to do a lot with positive charge, negative charge, and if you're not if you're not deep into the electricity rabbit hole, or you're not an electrician who understands this stuff, it can get very confusing even for me. And I am still learning a lot about this stuff. But essentially, when you look at chronic inflammation, what they say is that that's just a buildup of positive charge when we should be in a relatively balanced state, more so on the negative charge end of the spectrum, because of the exact reason that the Earth is negatively charged at its surface. If you look at the Earth as a whole, you have the negative charge on the surface, positive charge in the atmosphere, and as a result, I think just balancing yourself with the natural Earth's surface that's conductive is beneficial in the sense of reducing chronic inflammation from a very strong standpoint. So if we think about the evolutionary biological perspective, of course, like you said, we evolved to have direct contact to the Earth. And rubber soles and all of these shoes are relatively recent introduction. I mean, we're talking what, 100 years or so? So as a result, I think that has led to some serious issues in terms of like electromagnetic frequencies, electromagnetic potential, stuff like that.
Mhm. Okay, that makes sense. And I think to actually understand this fully, we probably should just start with chronic inflammation, right? I want to define chronic inflammation, and you give me your view on it. But people throw around this buzzword inflammation, like inflammation is the cause of everything. But I'm not sure everybody actually gets what that actually means. So when I think about inflammation, I think the generally accepted definition of inflammation is literally our immune system's response to pathogens and external things. And chronic inflammation, the issue with that is when your immune system is always turned on, it is causing damage to healthy tissues, right? It is causing biological damage to healthy tissue in your body. And a lot of people these days, it's not acute inflammation that's the problem, it's chronic
Mhm.
inflammation over long periods of time that is the major health issue of our time. And you are saying that by not grounding, it raises the threshold to develop a chronic inflammation. Essentially, it's easier to develop inflammatory conditions. Is that a good way to think about it?
Sure, I think it's certainly it's just one reason why it's one contributor to chronic inflammation. And we know that, from a biological perspective, your mitochondria actually sense electromagnetic frequencies. So there's this phenomenon that a lot of people are talking about with grounding called the umbrella effect. This idea that it might potentially protect you from non-native electromagnetic frequencies from 5G cell towers, your phone, computers, so forth. So, knowing that the mitochondria actually do sense electromagnetic frequencies, I think that's a very key point because It points us in the direction that, non-native EMFs and electromagnetic frequencies as a whole do have a very real impact on our physiology. And I think a lot of people try to discount that and try to say it's like pseudoscience or something of that nature. But from a first principles perspective, it makes sense.
It makes sense, but I think what people want to understand is like how much impact does this make? Because it is, if you're living in the modern world, it's just almost unavoidable, right? We live in an environment where it actually is unfortunately quite. Even though I was in the park yesterday, I was barefoot and stuff like that. For most people, for whatever reason, the way we've constructed society, that's not a reality. Like to just go barefoot, and then we're exposed to all these. You said like non-native EMFs. I assume you're referring to like cell phone radiation and like 5G signals and all these other things. I think what people want to understand is like what exactly is the health implication on them if they're being exposed to this all the time? Because there's a lot of people who are walking around healthy, it seems, and they're being exposed to this. There's other people who are dealing with a lot of chronic illness, and then the health authorities tell us none of this stuff is needs to be worried about. But we get into it because we understand that the body is an electrical mechanism, right? Everything is electrical conductivity from the heart to the brain. Everything is dependent on that, so it does make sense that electrical charges and things like free electrons, this is going to have major biological implications. So, but why is it though that it's so hard to find this signal amongst the noise? Like, why is this not a concern of traditional healthcare authorities? Why is this not a concern of the general public? And why is it only seems like a very niche population is even caring about this?
Yeah, I think it purely comes down to society is just addicted to technology. I mean, we want everything faster, we want everything better, and as a result, of course, how many people understand the idea that your body is electrical first before it's chemical? How many people understand that every single aspect of your body, for the most part, is conductive? And so, it's a combination of just not being educated on the topic. It's a combination of society's momentum at the moment, just pushing 5G towers and faster connectivity and all of this other stuff. So it's it's kind of the same idea as sunlight, the demonization of sunlight. You have ignorance, you have profit motive, incentive, all that stuff. And so when you combine that into into the societal structure that we're in now, I mean, we're just on the wrong end of the track, so to speak, in terms of like the momentum we're going.
Okay. And this might be hard to for you to kind of state as a fact or anything, but I just want to understand your assumption here. But let's just say, okay, we want to, what we're both trying to deal with is trying to address health issues in the world, especially chronic health issues, right? We want people to be healthy and full of life and everything. And in my mind, if I thought about like, okay, what are the major causes of health issues in the world? This is kind of how I would think about it. I would think, okay, nutrition, I think personally, has probably over 50% to do with most health issues here. That's how I think of it, is like nutrition, what people are consuming food wise. That's a big part of that bucket. The lack of movement is a big part of that bucket. Lack of sleep and just kind of like the exposure and how we use our attention is a big part of that bucket. And then last time we touched about like light exposure. I think that's a part of that bucket. I'm still unsure the implications, but you're saying it's the major part, which I understand to some degree. What I want to understand is, where does grounding come in? Of all of those things, how important is the grounding aspect in regards to chronic inflammation and health?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, of course, as you alluded to, I put light environment as the keystone pillar that holds everything else together. I think light environment, sleep, and then grounding, I really put on the same level, because I mean, just look at how the body works. The fact that every single aspect of your body is conductive, the fact that your cells communicate through not only light, but we can assume through electric impulses and things of that nature. I really do think that just from a chronic inflammation standpoint, this is a big deal. But again, most people are not going to sit down and understand and piece together all of this other stuff. So they cannot grasp how big of a deal that is. That's why we have a lot of you have the Rob Wolfs, the Mark Hymans who focus more on nutrition, exercise, things of that nature. They're important, but I don't think people understand the true grasp of how important light, sleep, and just the overall grounding discussion are together, because they are together and they
Mm-hmm.
meld beautifully.
Mm-hmm. So, as far as if that's the case, then I guess what people would want to know is, so how much grounding do we need, right? Like exactly how much do we need to be outside, touching the earth, whatever that means, and we'll get into the details about that. But I assume there's different, recommendations for someone who might be very healthy or someone who might be unhealthy and dealing with inflammatory conditions. But just for a general person, like I was outside yesterday for, a little bit of time, with bare feet on the ground. How much do you recommend, Zay? Like, how much people should people be grounding every single day?
I'd probably say anywhere within the range of 30 to 60 minutes is a good just overall prescription, so to speak. If of course if you are unhealthy or if you're dealing with some sort of chronic ailment, then you'd want to do it longer. And I think a lot of the research does back that up. The research also is very incredible just on this. We're talking about reduction in blood viscosity, which is thickness for people who don't know. We're talking about improving vagal tone in preterm infants. We're talking about better
And let
sleep.
me just stop you. So are you saying there in that, like, you've actually seen research, and maybe you could expand on what type of research you've seen in the sense, like, how are they even conducting these studies? Like, what is the control group? Like what have you come across? So when you say, improves blood viscosity, are you aware of like how they studied that actually?
I mean, I definitely have the studies available. I'm pretty sure for a lot of these, we're talking about randomized, double-blind, controlled placebo studies. So pretty up there in
Okay,
terms of research.
the
And
gold
it's just
standard.
gold standard, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So you're saying there's a lot of research that shows these biological implications for grounding. So do you feel like the science is cut and dry there? Like, do you think if anybody looked at this research, it's just unambiguous as far as its effect on biology and the positive effect it's having if you do ground?
I think it's pointing in the right direction. I still do think that we do need a lot more research. Here's the problem, though: who's going to fund that research? Who's going to look into the 20-year cohort study for grounding or for patients who are grounded in this sort of stuff? But in terms of like the direction it's going in, I mean, they're using um, they're using infrared imaging, they're using double-blind placebo studies, they're using grounding patches, they're using things for sleep. So I think it's very strong, and considering the biological implications and the way our body works, I just think it makes sense. And I really do think
Mhm.
that a lot of discount common sense in this argument as well.
Yeah, no, we're on the same page there. So you brought up a few things: reduced blood viscosity, increased vagal tone. I think the vagus nerve is getting a lot more popular these days. I guess you could say, in the sense of its implications, and that might be a topic to discuss in the future. What other health benefits are there to grounding?
Sure, I mean, I can definitely let me just pull up a list real quick here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, we're talking about improved
It,
mitochondrial function. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, I was just saying. I mean, since it works at kind of a very fundamental level, I assume it just pretty much touches everything. But I'm just very curious. I guess what are some of the noticeable things that people might experience if they do a grounding practice consistently?
Oh, sure. So yeah, I mean, definitely increased energy, increased mitochondrial function, inflammation we covered, blood viscosity we covered, vagal tone we covered, improved blood pressure. I think makes a lot of sense. We do have research on that. Improved pulse rates, improved what is it? Improved cortisol rhythms. So when you ground, when they've done grounding studies with sleep, they find that the circadian rhythm is balanced out much more. We have neuromodulation, immune response, wound healing, delayed onset muscle soreness. It improves that. It improves muscle damage as well after training. So again, like you said, because of we can get into the living matrix, and that's a very deep topic. But that system essentially touches every other system in the body. So, and that primarily
Mhm.
uses electrons, and once you get grounding in there, then that allows you to see all these benefits that we're seeing in the research.
Mhm. It's almost like whole body benefits that you're talking about, and you said, hey, 30 to 60 minutes. And then I've heard other people say you could kind of, just touch a tree or something like that. So, I guess what can you do? Or I guess you could go to the beach. I've heard people say like the waves crashing against the ocean, that gives like those free electrons that reduce oxidative stress in the body. So give me some more tips on how to appropriately ground, consistently.
Sure. So it really is, it boils down to whether the surface you're walking on is A, conductive, or B, an insulator. So it all boils down to that. If you have a natural earth surface that is conductive, such as soil, grass, sand, even concrete, because it's essentially just like minerals and water, right? That that's what that's the indicator as to how you know whether grounding is effective or not. Anything that is an insulator, like asphalt, for example, is not going to work, and for good reason, because you can't allow that the allowance of those free electrons to get into your body is just not going to happen. And also another interesting thing is from the biological perspective, we have sweat glands on our feet and our hands, and within each of these sweat glands, there are quite a few of them. There is an aqueous solution of sodium chloride that's actually conductive as well. So just from the evolutionary standpoint, this also makes sense from that perspective.
Hmm. Okay, so that's interesting. So that being said, it sounds like different. We have to be conscious. So I assume like artificial, man-made, substrates on the ground that might interfere with the grounding. And the best thing to do is it just being on grass? Is that just the best thing to do to effectively ground?
In my opinion, I think any wet surface is probably the best because you have a higher electroconductive potential, and then at the same time, water is a very fantastic medium for free electrons and a lot of these other things. I mean, we're talking about water in the context of semiconduction as well, biological semiconduction, and we can get into like structured water and charge and all that stuff, but I do think that a wet surface ideally is the best.
So you're saying that we shouldn't feel bad about wasting a day at the beach, essentially, which we can do here in Los Angeles. It's like because you're getting the sunlight, you're getting the water, you're getting the grounding. It sounds like you're getting all sorts of great feelings. I mean, like we always feel good when we come out of that. We might not understand why we feel so good. We think it was just because we're relaxing in nature, whatever. But you're saying there's like a deeper thing here. Like there's biological implications here, massive effects on health, actually, to just having spending a day on the beach.
Oh yeah, and I've commented on this in the past. I think it's the perfect what trifecta. You have grounding, sunlight, ocean water, which is just cold thermogenesis. You're getting minerals from the water, getting aerosolized minerals as well through the lungs and things of that nature. So it's really like the perfect thing, which is why I love the beach as well.
Man, that's good. So, what is the beach protocol then, Zaid? How many times do we have to go to the beach? And for those of us not living near a beach or not living near a body of water, what are they going to do?
I mean, hey, all grounding I think is still created equal. So if you're not next to a beach, if you can get near any body of water, that is also fantastic. Any natural body of water, even swimming in the ocean and swimming in natural made lakes and rivers and streams, that's also considered grounding as well. So people have a
Mhm.
lot of options. For those who are
Mhm.
near the beach, if you're really close, I'd say every single day. But at the very
Mhm.
least, 4 to 5 times a week, in my opinion.
Mhm. We evolved near water sources. We evolved with the water, just being close by water, being in water every single day, touching the ground, getting that sunlight every single day. Like for hundreds of thousands of years, that's how the human species evolved. And then over the
Yep.
last 100 years, we kind of just took it all away. We kind of just we have these closed environments. We took it all away, and yes, I think both of us were just learning about this in a deeper level, but it makes sense. I mean, it just makes sense that nature therapy is a thing, right? Nature therapy is almost just as effective as like an antidepressant. They say these days, right? It depends. Obviously, there's a lot of variables there, but so all of this does make sense. What should I hear about things like grounding shoes or grounding sheets? Even Brian Johnson, Blueprint and science based longevity, he uses grounding sheets. What are these things? How do these things work when it comes to grounding?
Yeah, so it's very simple. I mean, if you're talking about grounding shoes, you're going to have part of the sandal or shoe that's conductive as well. At the bottom, they'll usually put a little copper, like kind of like a plate to allow for free electrons to get into the body. But, I find those are not as effective as just placing your feet on the earth. And of course, you can take out a voltage meter and you can actually see the difference. It's just, of course, Mother Nature does not make mistakes. So if you're grounded to the earth with no barrier, so to speak, then that's going to be ideal. But if you're looking at like grounding sheets, for example, then they would essentially just have a conductive sheet on the bed, and then you plug it into I'm looking at an outlet right now. You plug it into the bottom part of the outlet, only that one. That's actually the grounded part of the outlet. And as a result, you get a direct connection from the earth into your bed. And that's why I think a lot of people experience benefits from just sleeping in general. Less inflammation, better restfulness, things of that nature.
Do you have grounding sheets? Do you use them?
Not yet, but I do want to get some.
Not yet. But yeah, so I've been looking into that as well. But that is something that seems it would make sense. I mean, you're on your bed for 8 hours a day or so, and one of the thoughts here is also that grounding, and you tell me this because you're the expert in actually this area, is that grounding likely has an effect on sleep quality, right? Does it increase like deep sleep? Does it increase REM sleep? Like, what do you know about the connection between how much grounding we do on a daily basis and our sleep quality?
I haven't seen any research on REM and deep sleep. That's a very interesting point that you brought up. I think mainly it has to do with the fact that you just have a balanced circadian rhythm. So, like I mentioned earlier, your cortisol rhythm is balanced in the way that it should rise in the morning and fall to its lowest at night. So, I think a lot of it does come down to just circadian biology, that overall rhythm. And what's interesting is that there's actually research. There was, I believe, a researcher who put people underground, independent of sunlight. He put people underground and saw how the impact of grounding underground impacted circadian biology, the rhythms. And he showed that independent of sunlight, without any sunlight whatsoever, these individuals were able to maintain their circadian rhythm properly just by being grounded.
Hmm. This is fascinating because once again, it has such interesting implications for human physiology. And to kind of end on this note, we're going to be diving a lot deeper in future discussions. Actually, I think this is just a starting point. We're just scratching the surface, so it's kind of an intro to this topic, and then we're going to have future discussions where we go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I guess my takeaway at this point is people just need to get outside, right? They just need to get outside more. Like if you find yourself not feeling that great, but you're also indoors most of the day, let's get you outside in nature. Like go touch grass or whatever it is, but go on hikes, do things in sunlight. Is that fair to say? Is that really all people need to do?
It's absolutely fair to say. I think you can dive into the science. I think the mechanisms behind this are incredibly complex, but what is simple in this discussion? Just the fact of going outside, doing it, and just practicing that almost every single day if you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's like people overcomplicate every single health topic, and at the end of the day, that's all we're saying. There's no money to be made off of this. There's nothing else. It's just the realization that we evolved under very specific circumstances. We're in a completely different environment, and likely getting a little bit closer in some areas to these things. And this is just obvious to anybody who's spent time in nature. It just feels good, right? This is just you get this subjective experience, but there is some very interesting things going on internally, biologically, that will likely make you healthier, and that's the bottom line. So, Zaid, we will dive deeper. Any last thoughts before we end this discussion on grounding, or any other key takeaways that you have?
Sure. I think the most important thing that I would share with people is tap into your intuitive feeling. Like when it comes to nature or anything that's not man-made, tap into what that intuition is telling you and how you're feeling in the moment, and that'll be a big indicator. Like, for example, sunlight stimulates beta endorphin, which is an opioid peptide. But why does it feel so good? You don't need to know the fact that sunlight stimulates that opioid peptide. You just need to know that, listen, I feel really good right now, and there's a real reason behind it.
Mm-hmm. This is such an important point because people overcomplicate everything. I actually like to think of the smoking example. Like, but I mean, now it seems ridiculous, but back in the 50s and 60s, like there was confusion around whether smoking caused damage, right? Yet doctors recommending like cigarettes and shit. And the reason there was because there was no double-blind control study yet showing the long-term effects of smoking, right? Like there was no, we couldn't show cause and effect on cancer progression over time, but our intuition would tell me, like, if you're inhaling smoke daily into your lungs, this is not good for your lungs, right? Like I don't need a study to tell me that this is not going to be good for your lungs long term, right? And once
Yeah.
again, here, while the science might not be comprehensive on the real implications of grounding, I don't need a study to tell me that it likely does have implications and it feels good. And it's likely something that, like you said, based on our intuition, is likely guiding us towards something that's healthy. Is that fair to say?
Exactly. Those systems that have been crafted by evolution over the course of millions and billions of years, they work perfectly, and your body is designed to sense those things. So it makes sense.
Yeah, we get into a whole other discussion about evolutionary biology, which we'll probably do in the future. And I do want to kind of actually that the whole idea that you said, it's a perfect system. I want to actually go into that deeper because I think there's a lot of nuance into that. But great points as always, Zaid. This has been fascinating so far, and we'll continue again. In the future, we're going to go a lot deeper. So if you're really interested in the science of grounding and understand the actual mechanisms of grounding, we will continue this conversation. But I hope everybody who's watching here got at least feels pretty good about the topic at this point. So I appreciate it, Zaid.
Yeah, awesome. Looking forward to the next one, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, all right, man. That was great, dude. I think that was awesome. Very informative. And I was just thinking about it when we were going over this. We kind of did a foundational discussion there,
Yeah.
and hopefully we'll share it on Twitter and everything else, and we'll